podcast, George, Chief Technology Officer at Redpoint, talks about ingredients of a technologist in data-driven world. So stay tuned. Welcome everyone to another episode of Future of Data podcast. Today we have with us George Corugedo from Redpoint, and a brief bio on George. So, a mathematician and a seasoned technology executive, George, with more than 20 years of business and technology experience. As co-founder and CTO, George is responsible for leading the development of Redpoint's technology stack. A former math professor, George left academia to co-found Accenture's customer insight practice, which specialized in strategic data utilization, analytics, and customer strategy. Previous position includes Director Client Delivery at Clarity Blue Inc., a provider of hosted customer intelligence solutions, and COO/CIO at Risquity, a receivable management company specializing in utilization of analytics to drive collections. So, George, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for willing to share your time with our community.
Well, thank you, Vishal. I appreciate the invitation, and it's great to be here.
Nice. So, fascinating. So, a mathematician turned technologist, right? So, yep. World couldn't have been better than these two words merging. So, why don't you start walk us through your journey from mathematician, what brought you here?
Sure. Well, it's interesting. What drove me, I think, to be a mathematician, and I only discovered this when I was in college. I think I had the realization that I wanted to be a mathematician because I wanted to impress my dad, because he was very good at mathematics. And that was because we were actually in the casino business. My dad, I grew up in Las Vegas, where obviously, gambling is legal. And my dad was in the casino business. So I, as a very young child, kind of lived in that world of cards and probabilities and games and gambling, and was always intrigued by that. And my dad had all that stuff in his head. So I shot off in college to go and study, and I always had a penchant and an interest in mathematics, although I hadn't intended to become a pure mathematician. I studied lots of sciences and everything. But eventually what happened is that I went far enough with my degree to realize that the lifestyle of a mathematician wasn't exactly the lifestyle I was really interested in. And while I loved being a mathematician, I thought, there were other things that I wanted to do in life. So I did teach for about 10 years, which was a great experience. And I would love to go back and teach as part of my retirement. But I felt that it was time for me to move on and apply those skills beyond the academic world.
Interesting. So fascinating, by the way. I'm blown away by the transition. So now let's talk about what are some of the challenges you faced. So being a mathematician, now going and running an organization's technology stack. So how has the transition been, and how, what are some of the challenges and some of the best practices you gained? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast. Through a journey.
Well, yeah, the two worlds are very different, and in the academic world, things move very slowly. Everything is done by consensus. But it's great. It's a fun world. And at the end of the day, I think teaching is one of the most noble and fulfilling activities any human can do. It's a way of helping people in a completely free, and it's a way of giving freely to others that will help them. And math is an area that people find intimidating, and my specialty was helping them to kind of calm down and enjoy mathematics. But it's a very different world. And so what really helped me with the transition, so that was a big challenge for me, is I kind of knew I wanted to do something else, but what helped me with that challenge is that I managed to land a position at Accenture, which, at that time was Anderson Consulting. And what that did for me is that it brought me into the world of being an entrepreneur with it's the mindset of an entrepreneur, but with enormous resources and foundation around you to get things done. And so it was a great opportunity for me to make that transition, bring the skills, learn the business side, but bring not so much the academic content, but the academic thinking to the table in a place where you have the opportunity to potentially make that a reality, right? So much of business, you end up undercutting the theory because you're trying to just get things done. Accenture, fortunately, is the kind of place where they'll let you play out that theory and think outside the box and then make it a reality. So it was a great place for me to really expand my experience, my knowledge. I remember the first client meeting I ever had at Accenture was with Chrysler. So we started big and it just got bigger from there. So it helped me in so many ways. I'm so grateful to that experience. It was a wonderful place to grow and to learn. We always used to kid around that at Accenture, you learn in dog years. So I quickly learned about business, learned about technology, learned about getting things done in big organizations, and then how to bring and how to help people in big organizations. They have the same intimidation about doing big projects and achieving great things. How do I come in there and help them take away those constraints and those blinders and say, okay, wave a magic wand. What would you have sitting in front of you, and how do we get there, right? And that's what I do best is help them figure out how to use technology to achieve what they thought was the unachievable.
Interesting, fascinating, by the way. So one thing that I before I get into your post academia days, so one thing that I definitely heard about, and from a lot of executives that we talk to, from who have academia background and now in data science, because they are contributing a big chunk of professionals today in data science are from academia, pursuing their research in enterprise fashion. So now one thing that we hear about is, hey, with current advent of GPUs and capability of a platform out there today, it's killing the statisticians. So I remember this. So one guy who is leading one of the top insurers risk practice, and he was a statistician by trade. He said, probably I'll be the last statistician alive, and it's because of all this sophistication with graphic algorithm and everything. And his perspective was pretty cool. So he said that mathematics was created as a way for us to visualize things, right? Because there was no tool, there was no capability. So there's a circle, there's a hyperbola, this is projectile, and then you just go from there on. So right. What are some of your thoughts that comes to your mind, that is it really like, will the mathematics of what we are used to, what we are raised up with, will be relevant as we get into this data-driven world or something? We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Well, I think it is. I do think that unattended algorithms and their use is going to spread, and it's not because people don't like mathematicians, or statisticians. It's because the demands for making decisions are such that you don't have time for human intervention. So you have to go with algorithms that can keep up with the complexity of the environment they're in. However, there's still going to be a need for people to figure out and develop these algorithms and to invent them, to tune them, and to understand. And this is really important, to understand when the algorithm is the right algorithm for a particular problem. Much of machine learning these days just throws everything in the kitchen sink and then, kind of just starts pumping things out. And so, there is some judgment that goes into that. And so that's part of the thing, of the role of the statistician. The other role, which I think is critically important, and this is really, really important, as algorithms take over a lot of the decision making in real-time situations with clients or with customers. Say a brand has an interaction with a customer and they have a real-time interaction happening, and there are algorithms that are in there helping make decisions. The importance and the human genius has to now be applied to the strategy for which those algorithms are being used. And let me give you an example. In a simple situation where you have an optimization algorithm, let's just say, we work a lot in marketing. So let's just say you've got a website and you've got a little div, where you're going to put an image, a hero image of some sort, and you have an algorithm optimizing that. Well, optimization depends on a fitness function. That fitness function is a KPI or some metric that measures some aspect of your business. In this particular case, you may want something as simple as click-through. Great. It's very easy, very straightforward, nothing genius there. But as algorithms grow, as the optimization and the use of these algorithms in optimization across channels, across an organization, are used more and more readily, well, then those metrics that we use as the fitness function for that optimization become critically important. And I remember reading a really interesting article in McKinsey Quarterly, where they were talking about the importance of strategy in the world of AI, because the algorithms will optimize against that fitness function, but it's really up to you to determine the right fitness function. And that is going to be the role of the statistician, I think, or the data scientist, is to become a little bit more of a business person and understand how the business expresses itself numerically, and then understand which of these functions can be defined as the best fitness function to drive your organization forward.
Interesting. No, I think well said. And one thing I was thinking about is when you were saying, and you put it the best, that statistician going in business functions, right? So you went to the technology stack. Is that an advisable route? Because I think we do see a lot of statistician, mathematician looking at the business problem and trying to find the KPI, I think you put it really, really best at how they can sort of conceptualize a business problem into a mathematical problem, and then from there on sort of addressing. That's beautiful. What about on the technical side of things? So is that an advisable, like, how was your experience been coming from the mathematics side of things going into the technology stack?
Well, I think the mathematics is kind of like the price of entry. You need to know how things work. One of the things that I used to tell, excuse me, my phone kept ringing, so I was just trying to put it on do not bother me here. But the price of entry is knowing the algorithms, knowing the mathematics. You've got to understand it, because if not, what happens is that you turn your power over to someone else. This is what I used to tell my students all the time when I was teaching. I would tell them, look, I would tell them about consulting jobs that I would do. And I'd say, all right, I was in Miami at the time, and I was building predictive models for direct mail out at the Miami Herald, right? Real simple, no big deal. And they're selling subscriptions to a newspaper, nothing earth-shattering. However, they hired me, they paid me some money. I went away, I built these models, and I said, okay, here's what you need to do. Now, at that moment, those executives that had hired me to do that job had no way to tell if I had done my job well or not.
True.
They had no way of deciding that other than, well, okay, he seems like he knows what he's talking about. I had the power, even though I wasn't part of the business. At that moment, I owned the power. They handed it to me. And so knowing the mathematics gives you the power.
Interesting.
And I've always really believed that if you know the details and you know how the math works, you have the power, because otherwise, if you don't, you're ultimately going to turn that power over to somebody else to fix it for you. And so while I'm not saying that because I'm some power hungry maniac, but it's really important, because if it's your responsibility to get something done, well, then you better know, right? Because if not, you're relying on other people that may take you down the wrong way. And I may be relying on other people. I don't have to do anything. I've got lots of employees that work for me, but I have to know enough to know if they're taking me in the right direction or the wrong direction. So I think having that awareness, having that understanding, being able to converse intelligently, at least in these topics, is the minimum price of entry for being part of that, of those decisions.
Interesting. Interesting. So now let's talk about your current role. Like, if you can walk us through what you do now and what that will really fascinate. We'll resume after a short break. This part of the podcast is brought to you by First Friday Fair, fastest AI-powered way to find your next opportunity. Check out the website firstfridayfair.tao.ai and find your next dream job. Let's get back to the podcast.
Yeah, so right now I am the CTO and one of the founders of Redpoint Global. And and I want to make sure it's Redpoint Global Inc. It's not to be confused with Redpoint Ventures. So we are a software company, and what we build is a multi-layered stack that is an enterprise customer engagement hub. And what that does, it does a lot of things, and it's taking a lot of categories that the analysts pull together or talk about independently, and we pull them together. Number one is the data layer, the CDP, the Customer Data Platform. That is a very unique species of data environment that is relatively new, and it's designed, the way we define it, it's designed to ingest batch and real-time data continually to both create and update golden records in minutes, seconds, or even on demand. And so that is absolutely critical in order to drive the optimal real-time decision across the entire enterprise. The next piece is the analytics. We have a layer of machine learning analytics. It's all very unattended style algorithms that's all designed to support these real-time decisions. And so we have those algorithms available as well. We're not meant to be all end all. You know, I'm a very pragmatic statistician in the sense that the only model that matters to me is the one that works the best. I don't care who built it. Let's just make one that makes the most money. So our models are very good, but if you have other models, that's great. It's a wide open system. And then finally, we have the intelligent orchestration, which is really that real-time engine that allows you to take the data, work off of one data set, the analytics, and then make real-time decisions across both inbound and outbound channels simultaneously to do cross-channel or omni-channel optimization, true omni-channel optimization. So it's a vision and a technology stack that a lot of people are starting to talk about. I think Gartner just compressed a couple of their reports to capture this. But we've built the whole technology stack. Right now, the belief is you've got to build it. We have the whole stack, and each one of our components in its own right is ranked very highly with Gartner and Forrester, but together they're tightly integrated. They work very, very well together, and they they form a unique and incredibly powerful customer engagement solution for the market.
Interesting. So how much of your role is as a technologist for this particular product or company is outfacing vis-a-vis in-facing? Like how much of your like if you can split between the two, like how much of your time is spent addressing customer problem vis-a-vis of supporting solution?
Yeah, I spend I'd say it's probably 50-50. I wouldn't mind if it was more than that, customer facing, because the customers, number one, the customers are like students. I'm helping them, I'm teaching them the art of the possible. Often customers or brands, they get stuck and develop a comfort level in the world of constraints they live in. And what I'm there to tell them is wipe those constraints away, and what would you want? And to a large extent, we can deliver that for them. Now, the flip side of that coin is that you better have a strategy to take advantage of all this new technology, because if not, all you're going to do is the same old thing, right? So you really have to bring that strategy, but I'm there to help them understand the art of the possible. And then I spend the other 50% of my time working and strategizing internally on the technology with my development teams. Now, I can't say I love working with my development teams and inventing stuff, but I think where a lot of the magic happens is working with clients. I love both parts of my job, and I'd say right now it's 50-50, but I think if I could change it, I would even move it a little more client facing, because I feel that's where we get the best ideas, we get the best vision. At the end of the day, we've got a lot of smart people, but they're the ones in the field, right. And they're the ones that are facing the real challenges. And so we love to learn from them and are very opportunistic in our development in terms of capturing these problems and then figuring out how to abstract them and make them part of our software.
Interesting. So what is, if you want to walk us through, what is data-driven customer engagement platforms? Or I think you said customer engagement hub. So what exactly is that, if you can help us understand in a very layman term?
It's a way of capturing everything that's knowable about a customer, analyzing that to understand that customer in a variety of contexts, and then have the ability to communicate to that customer that informed with that insight at the right moment, location of their choosing. Because the world of marketing is no longer just pushing out messaging. It's about being ready when they come to you and giving them what they want or what they need, or help them discover what they want whenever they decide they want to do it, whether it's on their phone in the middle of the night or it's on their computer during the day, or whatever the different circumstances might be. You've got to be ready and available for that. And that's what our technology does. It helps the organization, the brand, speak with one voice across all their channels in an optimized way to, it's all part of digital transformation. And digital engagement and digital experiences are all technologically mediated experiences. So now, how do I take that experience, make it transformative, and use it to bolster that relationship between the customer and my brand? And that's really the heart of what we do, and do it on grand scale of the enterprise.
Interesting. So now, as a technologist, right? So your job is to support this customer engagement platform. Now we know that with the advent of technologies, social networks, there are interaction happening. Like every day, there's a new social network. There are new channels in which sort of customers are engaging, or at least soon wannabe customers or prospects or whatever we call them are engaging. So how much of an uphill battle is this for a technologist like you to envision and you use the word omni-channel, right? So simplest way to explain one of the most complicated scenario ever, right? So
Yeah.
how do you like, what are what are your challenges, or how do you cope up with keeping everything in radar and sort of creating some kind of ontological relationship with all these emerging platforms? So if you can walk us through some of those things.
Well, part of it is, let me think. Part of it is driven by the fact that we really understand. We have the, philosophically, we built our technology as an open garden. So that means that we can interconnect with virtually any other technology that might be part of the ecosystem. So part of our approach is to say, look, every company, particularly large companies, have an ecosystem of technologies that they're not going to get rid of overnight, right? So what we do is we help them find a way, and this helps ease the pain and the fear. We help them find a way of, instead of just scraping the floor and putting everything in there new, we tie things together so that the things they like they can keep, the things they don't like they can take out, and then we help become the connective tissue between all these pieces, between the iPaaS that we have in the data and the APaaS that we have through microservices and being able to reconstruct our application to serve many needs. We can deliver a very tailored experience, a very tailored set of functionality to solve an organization's problem, and that really reduces the fear and the anxiety, because truthfully, what stops people is the angst of the magnitude of the change of what they're embarking on. And so whatever you can do to make them feel like, look, yes, you're going to take a huge hill, but I'm going to be there by your side all the way. That's what really helps. And we just had our first customer conference last week, and it was a very exciting event. I was terrified, but it was great. It turned out to be a wonderful event. And our customers, to the last one, said that they felt a tremendous level, an unheard of level of support from us in terms of standing by them and supporting them to their point of success, right? And so that's what we do, and that reputation gets out and helps. But there's always challenges. There's always misinformation. There's a lot of misinformation out there that's put out by competitors, by other people. Companies that say, oh yeah, we do that, and they don't even come close to doing that. There's a lot of fear, and then you run into the usual things you find in large organizations where people are being territorial. They want to have their little fiefdom. They don't want to play nice. And right now, the companies that are succeeding are the companies where marketing and technology partner up as one and they go attack. And those are the companies that have ambition, have vision, have courage. Those are the ones that are winning.
Interesting. And I think, and I love how you use the word open garden. I think that's phenomenal, right? So so basically any future upcoming guys, if you want to put something that sort of can match up with the growing platform out there, I think having an open garden where all these can come and interact would actually definitely give a very omni-channel platform. So that's remarkable. Now let's talk about, as a technologist, right? As a technologist, when you look at some of the customers or some of the people who are deploying solutions out there today, what are some of the things that they are doing wrong, or some of the challenges that you see that businesses are seeing and they shouldn't see those things? Like, if you can shed some light on?
Well, there's a lot of companies that work in the periphery that become shiny new objects. And so a lot of companies spend money with these little companies that serve a little bit here, a little bit there, or, there was the whole wave of DMPs that went through the world, and they're going to be the next, you name it, and they became the next acquisition that got consolidated and almost forgotten. And so there's a lot of that. There's a lot of the next new shiny thing in marketing, and it's problematic because if you don't have a solid foundation, and it's really like anything, if you don't have a solid foundation then it's really just not going to work for you. And when it comes right down to it, the single most important part and the biggest mistake people make in marketing, and I think in a lot of areas that are data driven, is not getting the data correct and merged and cleansed and ready for use. I don't know if you know a fellow named by Scott Brink, by the name of Scott Brinker. He is a big speaker in Martech and so on. And he had the keynote at our customer conference and talked about the idea that artificial intelligence and machine learning, they've already overtaken the world. They're everywhere and they're being used everywhere. The only thing that limits their application is the state of the data. And the thing that still limits analytics is that most companies are dealing with lousy data. And until you clean the data and perfect the data and curate the data to your purposes and really spend the time and energy to get that data in that perfect structure, format, the golden record, whatever it is you need, nothing's going to work right. And so we obsess about data. We spend an enormous amount of time focusing on the data and making sure that the data is correct for our customers to then go and launch these strategies effectively and successfully.
Interesting. And what are some of the things that that you see businesses doing right? That you're like you are always given this pleasant surprise that, hey, how could you figure this thing out? So what are some of the things that you see from the customer end or from your interaction with outside vendors or that you're constantly surprised that businesses understand what they're talking?
Well, I'll tell you, the businesses that impress me are companies that have figured out that marketing is highly technological and technology really doesn't understand marketing. And so you got to bring the two together, right? And where I've seen the greatest success is where you have VPs of MarTech or VPs of innovation that are looking for ways to help the company move down that digital transformation path. Those are the companies that are succeeding. Those are the companies that are winning. And they are the ones that I'm always stunned by because in most cases, you have to be the proponent of this vision. It's a wonderful situation where you walk in and they already have the vision and they're just looking for how do we get there, because then I've got a simple answer for them. Here, I hand you the blueprint on how to get there. But sometimes they don't have that. But if they do, though, that is certainly something, that merger of marketing and technology, I think is a very important partnership that I see that works very, very well. That is one thing. The other thing is that there are companies like Capital One, like others, that live and die by the quality of data, and their success lives and dies by the quality of their data, and that's it. I mean, the companies that really know how to succeed, big, even legacy companies like the big banks and everything, they understand the importance of data and they succeed by the quality of their data. And those companies always really impress me because as big as they are, they get it. And they don't let the complexity of the organization stop them from doing the right thing.
Interesting. I think so. You raised an interesting point, by the way. So about data and the bridge between the data and analytics, right? So say marketing or customer experience and the data. And we hear this thing surprisingly a lot that some businesses are really amazing at capturing data. Like they have freaking every possible bit that they can get their hands onto, but they lack the ability to analyze that properly, right? And some businesses are amazing with analytics. They have like they know what they're doing, but they don't have any data. Like they because it's not in the culture. They want to do everything right, but they have forgot somehow how to like capture everything so they can decide what is right. So, what are some of the recipes? If suppose I'm a startup today, right? So either you could, and it's very like both world are very tempting, right? So I can put logs everything and then say, hey, I'll look at it in the future, right? And soon the company is $1 billion revenue, and the future never happened, and now I don't know where to analyze that. On the other side, I said, yeah, I'll capture. I just know my customer, and I just capture really great, and never focus on anything else that's happening around the world. And then again, $1 billion revenue later, oops. So what are some of the practices to sort of bridge the gap between the data and analytics?
Well, the first thing I'd say is that if I did a startup and I achieved $1 billion in revenue very quickly, I don't know that I'd worry too much about the data, because whatever's working is fine. But that being said, my bias is more data in general is better. I'm not saying you keep everything. You try to get. I think storage is cheap enough that my bias is for more rather than less. So you keep as much data as you can practically. But then what's really important is, again, is to have a strategy, a vision. How am I, as a brand, as a startup brand or as a legacy brand, how am I going to create a transformative engagement experience for my customer? And then as I do that, then I can back out to what data do I need, right? So I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, we have a scenario where a housewife or a working mom went for a jog, is walking in through her front door, and her phone crosses a geofence of her front door, and the refrigerator wakes up. Refrigerator says, welcome home. Here are some recipes for today based on your likes, the food inventory, and your caloric intake, and so on, right? And how long based on the time of day and everything. Well, what do I really need there in order to do that? Well, I need to know the inventory that the refrigerator is going to give me. I need to know the person's preferences that I can either ask up front or figure out over time as they use and eat and prepare meals. I can also need the data. I will also need the data from their motion tracking device, right? So that's a mobile phone connection to their iPhone, Apple Watch or whatever. And then I'm going to need some sensitivity to kind of her rhythm and routine, right? And kind of what time of day do they need something shorter or longer. But if you think about the data needed for that, none of that is particularly difficult data to get, right? But I do need to bring a few pieces of data together. I may have to create a data partnership with whoever the tracking device is. But in a real quick analysis, I've determined all of the data I need to really figure out that problem really effectively, right? So I would start always with, and really be creative, push yourself to think as creatively as possible about what those transformative experiences are that you would like to present to people, and then work backwards from that onto what data do you need to do that. There's a certain core of data that you're always going to need about people, but then beyond that, what is it that you need to create that transformation? And again, it's push the envelope, be creative, and I think you'll be surprised that you can find the data.
Interesting. No, I think well said. Couldn't agree more. So now let's talk about the technologists today, or the leaders that are emerging in data science. So if suppose I'm coming from the technology and like, what are some of the tenets of successful leaders in technology today? Like, what are some of the recipe or ingredients of successful technologists today that you want to see, or you see, or like, thoughts?
I think it's really important as a tech, and probably as any kind of leader, but in technology, I think it's really important to have a commitment to the truth. And what I say by that is that I'm not saying that leaders or technology leaders might have a bias for deception, but it's easy in technology to develop a bias for technology. I'm a Linux zealot, or I'm a SAS zealot, or I'm a Windows zealot, or whatever. And that bias now starts to color your world. Well, that may be all you know, but that's your limitation that you've got to overcome, right? What you have to be is knowledgeable in all of the technologies, because the one thing you know about technology is that every bit of it has benefits and trade-offs, and the trick to success, the key to success, and everybody knows this but doesn't always follow it, is getting the right technology with the right set of trade-offs to solve a problem. And all too often I see departments that are gung-ho on, AWS or on Azure or on this or on that, rather than analyzing the problem, stepping back and saying, this is going to be best solved with a Linux Docker and to create a swarm, and this, people just get really hung up in technology with their biases. And I think that is something that is, it hurts me when I see this, because I almost feel like we are in a special position because we've spent the time, for whatever reason, we're introverted, we're nerds, whatever, but we spent the time to learn this knowledge about the technology. And it's critical that we tell the truth and that we tell it like it is. Not only will our clients respect us more, even if we tell them things they don't like, they'll respect us more and trust us more if we tell them the truth. And it just stands to reason that if we do that, then we're going to be more successful. So I just think that often is lost, that personal bias, personal preferences often, get argued for, rather than a true pure analysis is done of a situation and then a recommendation based on that. We've turned clients away because they're not ready for our technology. That's just the fact, right? It's good for them to know that so that they can pick the right technology. And it's smart for us, because if not, we're not going to let them fail, and it's going to cost us a lot of money to try to support them. So we know when we don't belong, so we tell them, right? And maybe someday they'll be at another company and they'll say, hey, you can trust this guy. They'll tell you the truth. And that, I think, is the single most important thing that a technology leader can do for his customers and for his team.
No, I think I absolutely love it. I think technology bias, right? So I want to spend some more time on that thought, because I know as a technologist, you have a lot of power now because of how the world is emerging, and now it's all the more critical. It's now part of every corporate DNA fabric. It's part of the culture now. It's just getting ingrained in. It's like it's your nervous system now for most of the businesses, right?
That's right.
So now, once you are actually controlling the nervous system and you have a bias, it's a problem. So now, what are some of your thoughts or hacks or suggestions you have to sort of address that bias or to mitigate that bias?
Well, what I do is I try to come in prepared with a tremendous level of knowledge, and if I don't have it, I bring other people, right, that do have a broad spectrum of knowledge, and people that also share that passion for being unbiased, right? That will look at Windows or look at Linux and see the pluses and minuses of either one, and not be get all crazy about using one or the other. And if I don't have the knowledge, I bring people with me. But I think it's all about knowledge. It's all about testing. It's all about experience. It's all about looking at technology and being able to call a failure and learning from it, and calling a success and learning from that, right? If you're honest with yourself, you've seen the technologies that you are real zealous for fail in certain circumstances that you have pushed them for. So be honest, step back, look at that, and then, recognize that there are other technologies out there. And, technology is not a lifestyle. It's not like, I'm not walking around like, hey, I'm a Linux guy, and I have it branded on my chest. There are people that live that way, it's the coder lifestyle. Hey, that's what I do. And they have all these attitudes about one technology or another. You just got to put that away. If you want to be a mature technology leader, you got to get past that. And you've got, some people are zealots for open source. Well, I got to tell you, in the world of Hadoop, I've seen a lot of very poorly written code. And so, Hadoop is great for some things, but it's not the be all end all. And some of it's written like crap. So, you can't, nothing is magic. Everything has its trade-offs. And in order to be able to represent that with a client, you as a technologist or as a technology leader have to be well grounded in those technologies and understand what the realities are.
Interesting. No, I think well said. And I bunch of my interaction with some of the successful technologists, I think one of the constant recipe that I've heard, if you can afford, is have more than one vendor, right? So that will, if you lock in, hey, my X percentage of the business or X percentage of the logic would be entertained by either a competing solution or whatever, right? So that as a technologist will keep you sort of in check when it comes to bias. I think there are a lot of interesting hacks. One more thing I definitely want your perspective on. So it's appified technologies today, right? So technology is now shrinking and containing in an appified manner. Instead of now buying the entire suite of maybe Oracle or IBM, you can just go and buy a very sort of app that can analyze a specific use case. Now, as a technologist, how much of a migraine does that give you, or how much of do you see as an opportunity when sort of you think about managing your business in future or helping businesses in future? Like what are some of the challenges that you're seeing with this, or some of the opportunities?
With what? With IBM and other big companies?
With the idea of appified analytics, right? Or appified applications.
Well, it's just like anything else. It's like these companies, what they are marketing companies, and they happen to market technology, right? They are great at marketing and creating buzz about things. But I think the blanket recommendation I would make for everybody out there is always stay close to the fundamentals. The fundamentals are what created these things. And if you look past the shiny veneer, what you will find is that the fundamentals work as well or almost as well as some shiny new object that you're being asked to pay incredible amounts of money for, right? If there's a real business case and a fit and it's going to save you money or something like that, well, then perhaps it's worth it to you as a company to go out after that. But what I can tell you is that most cases, it's just a lot of hype, and you're really not going to get that much value. You're not going to get that much value out of it as is claimed, right? There's a lot of technologies out there that claim all sorts of tremendous value. If you just do this, the world opens up to you. Well, it doesn't really work the way, as they say, if it's too good to be true, it usually is.
Interesting. And now let's talk about, let's get back on the startup mode. So if you are coming up with a solution and you want to put together a technology team, what would be an ideal candidate to you? Like if you're recruiting a technologist or a CTO for a very early startup, probably data driven. So what are some of the tenets that you will see in that candidate?
Let me think about that. So I'm starting a startup in the data and analytics world, and I want what characteristics? So I think certainly a very solid foundation in mathematics and statistics, if they like, and coding. I think it's important that they do have some coding background. Beyond that, though, this might be a little counterintuitive, but I'd like to see them in situations where they apply mathematics, like physics. Some of the smartest and best technologists that I have ever met in my career have been physicists. And
True.
part of that has to do with the rigor of thought that physicists are trained to live by, with the rigor of observation that they're trained to live by, that they don't get caught up in these biases and these whims, that the things they deal with. And again, it's really all about the fundamentals. They learn that the laws of physics are eternal. They are what they are, and you can't
Right.
change. And we use that term around here all the time, is that you can't defy the laws of physics, right? And things work the way they work. And and if somebody says, oh, I can turn silver into gold, well, good luck, but I don't believe you, because that just doesn't work that way. And so I like people with that pragmatic kind of foundational experience in life, right? Whether it comes from physics or some other applied science, but not just mathematics. I want an application and the pragmatism that comes from working in an applied in an applied field.
Interesting. So, well said. I think even I remember a couple of years back when we were hiring a bunch of data scientists, we picked up astrophysicists. I think most underserved but most proficient folks. Because at that, I think what I loved about their background was, so they're in a profession of finding this tiny hump or tiny sort of blips, right? So they have the patience, they have the rigor, they have
That's right.
like, and so it was fast. Like no one was looking at them. Sort of, they were really good.
Well, yeah, they're looking for enormously
And
subtle
right,
effects.
right,
And so, yeah, I know. I did my thesis work in planetary physics, and had to study, analyze the light curve that came from an occultation of one of Saturn's stars by
okay,
our moon, and the effect that I'm looking for is minimal. And
right.
from this effect, I'm actually deducing the height of the cloud layer in that moon. It's an extraordinary combination of things, and I'm using high-powered technology. I'm using some really ancient mathematics and this planetary understanding to put all this together. It was wonderful, but that's the type of pragmatism and patience that they bring. Yep.
Great, great. So now let's talk about your KPIs as a leader today, as a technologist for a data driven customer engagement company. So what are some of your KPIs that you care about?
Well, I have regular meetings with my team. And one of the KPIs that is kind of a soft KPI is the level of energy that's in that call every week, right? When we get on the phone, how excited are the people about what they're working on? How creative are people being about their solutions they're coming up with? How well are people interacting with one another? Are they cooperating, or are they, fighting, right? Or are they combative, right? That type of mix to me is very, very important. And if you listen to those calls, I really look for cooperation between the different members of the team. I look for people, people in my organization have a great deal of freedom to do what they want to do, as long as they get their core job done, right? If you want to go work on some other problem and come up and and come up with some magic solution, we encourage you 100%. And we get a lot of those. And when we get those, we celebrate them. And it's just wonderful to have that type of spirit, and everybody, really celebrates that type of effort. So those are the kind of the things that I'm looking for. They're not really tangible, but they're very important day-to-day metrics on the health, the mental health of that group you're working with. From another KPI is just simply, are we getting code out on time, and how well written is the code, how many bugs are we finding each cycle in the field rather than in testing. And so, you know, and I rejoice when we make a change to our QA process and we find that it really has an effect on the quality of the code that gets shipped. So so that's a part that I think is really important. And then the final piece or the final metric that I have is, do we always have more ideas than we have time to code? And I always want to be in that place where we have too many ideas and not enough time to code, because as long as I'm there, it's forcing me to optimize, to prioritize against reality, against my demands from customers and organizational demands. Also, it's helping me understand what is the single biggest, best way to spend $1, right? What's the best way to spend that dollar? And then the other part is, it also tells me that the team their creativity is on. You know, if the team's creativity is clicked on full blast, then we're all bringing as much as we can to the table. So those are kind of the things that I look for. If I find that a member of our team isn't quite up to that, I always reach out to them and try to, you know, kind of find out what's going on and kind of help improve the situation. But those are kind of the things that I look for. You know, some hard and some soft.
Interesting. So thank you so much for walking us through that. So one more thing, as a technologist or as a technology leader, how do you keep yourself updated on what's happening on the technology stack, on technological world? So what are some of the thoughts, or how do you keep yourself updated?
Oh, I read technology, you know, the technology garbage that comes running through my phone all the time. I read it incessantly. I read it in the car. I read it when I'm in the bathroom. I read it all the time. I read that stuff constantly. I don't necessarily, you know, I read it more for like, you know, you read it at this level, but I interpret it at this level. And what I mean by that is that I don't get too worried or too hung up on the details. I try to think of, what does this mean in the bigger picture, right? And so I always understand not just that this happened here, but that this is reflective of a trend that's maybe happening, right? So that's what I'm always looking for. But I do read a lot and talk to people and talk to customers and talk to other technologists. But that, you know, that seems to be the only way to really keep it. And then I talk to my staff, because they read a lot. They're always sending articles around, as am I, that are interesting and relevant to our business.
Interesting. So, and one question is, so what keeps you up at night?
What keeps me up at night?
Or you ever sleep?
Yeah, I don't know. I was thinking, when was the last time I slept? No, no. I think on a professional level, what keeps me up at night is time. What keeps me up is, how are we going to find a way to achieve the vision that we have, right? How do we find the resources to get there? Because there's always more. There's always more to build, more vision. So that's what keeps me up professionally, is how to get more out of what we have and how to get there faster. Personally, what keeps me up is when I don't live by my own rules. You know, I think, you know, somebody asked me once this similar question in an interview. What gets you down? What gets you depressed? And what gets me depressed is when I do things that I don't believe in. And so I have to stay within my belief system, kind of keep my head straight.
Interesting. Wow. So now we're almost at the tail end of the interview, by the way, and thank you so much. It's been fascinating. So let's talk about your favorite read. Like, do you if you want to share with our folks your favorite read?
Well, my favorite book of all time, and I read it periodically, is To Kill a Mockingbird, and at the risk of sharing lots, a lot of those characters, let's just say, have some participation in my passwords. I'll just put it there. I won't tell you why, but I love that book because of its sense of justice and truth, right? And those two things are very important to me. And I think it's one of the finest representations of justice and truth that I've ever read. So that I love. That's my all-time favorite book. I also really like reading Emerson, you know, and the essays on self-reliance, because I really am a firm believer that the only thing that stops you and prevents you from achieving your goals in life is your personal fear. It's you. It's not anything in the environment. It's you, right? And so anything that helps me confront those internal fears and overcome them and move forward through them is something that I love. So I find that helps me do that, as does rock climbing. Rock climbing really helps me, you know, face fears, sit with them, and then move past them.
Nice, awesome. So that as a last question that I have for you, any closing remark for our audience? And again, George, it's a pleasure having you, and thank you so much for spending time. So if you can share your closing remark with our audience.
No, I just want to again thank you all for taking the time and the invitation. I feel like these things are a privilege, and I do appreciate being on. I just want to say that you know, there's a lot of craziness in the world, and I think truth and justice are really important. And as we were talking about, and I think there's a role for that in technology. And you know, justice is maybe a little bit different thing, but telling the truth, think straight, talk straight. That's something that I learned at Accenture. I think it's one of the most valuable things I learned at Accenture. And I think we can use as much of it as we can get in the world.
Interesting. And with that, thank you so much, George, for sharing your technological thinking with our audience. And it's been a pleasure. You're always welcome to come back on a show and share and talk it out. And thank you so much. And again, I do appreciate you sharing time with our audience.
No, thank you so much, Vishal. Appreciate it.
Awesome.
I thought I was sick of home, but actually I was homesick. Never really knew that I would have to grow up so quick. I'm so uncomfortable, don't know anybody here. Just a couple dudes that I met once, that's it. And I go into the booth feeling nervous. Got butterflies in my stomach like I'm so worthless. Is the mic on? I don't know how to work this. Inside I'm breaking down, I hope I'm not up on a